Welcome to this first lecture of this module about workplace outcomes. In this module I will introduce what workplace managers can aim at to strategically manage their work environment. They really have to consider cost, they generally have a limited budget, so it's important to think about what things you can affect with your workplace and how. So first I will explain the value-adding management model, which shows a really clear way of how you should strategically think about workplace design. And then I will go into more depth of two different categories of how to add value with the workplace design: the exchange value and the use value. So the value-adding management model looks like a really simple and straight equation. It basically says we start with input, and through a certain process we receive a certain output, and that leads to a certain outcome. But it's not that simple in real life, in workplace design context. The input, we could generally say this is how we do things. An example from the workplace design could be how we implement new lighting in an office. The output is what we get from that. And to stay with the same example, we get, for example, an improved lighting level, or maybe changing lighting levels during the day, which are supporting employees. And then we get to this outcome, and that is why we are doing this in the first place. And do we want to make people more productive, or did they suffer from health issues that we are dealing with? So the outcome is where the actual impact takes place, and this is where the added value for the organization shows. And I think there's too much focus on output and too little on outcome in workplace management. And like I said, it's not such an easy equation as we see here. You want to add this strategic value, and even if you decide which outcome you want to reach, we know that it's not just a causal effect, but that it's more like a mechanism that you need to trigger. So you need to make sure that the workplace design helps in triggering this increased productivity or health of employees that you are aiming at as an important added value. So if we look at value, already in the classic economic theory, in the 19th century, we saw the distinction between exchange value and use value. And exchange value is more focused, it's a direct value if you look at real estate. It makes a difference between the output and the input. It's what you can reach with the real estate itself. But on the other hand, there's this use value, and there the focus is more on this outcome. What's the output-outcome ratio? And this is more of an indirect value. So this is, for example, how the workplace design supports employees and how therefore employees can do things for the organization as a whole. This exchange value is much easier to measure. You can state certain key performance indicators, and you can measure lighting levels, you can measure temperatures, you can measure noise levels. The use value is generally less easy. You can measure satisfaction, but health is harder to measure, and productivity is even more hard to measure. And also it requires more of a collaboration with other departments besides the workplace design department. So R&D, human resource management. You have to work together to make sure that this value is perceived by the employees and the organization. So for both types of value, workplace managers increasingly need evidence. They want to base their design on evidence created by research. And they need that to make sure that there's budget allocated to the interventions that they want to do. In the end, organizations, of course, need to have a profit, and they have limited budgets to spend on real estate. So it's important to have evidence for that. And that's kind of where the problem with a lot of workplace aspects is still present. The healthy workplace, for example, has a lot of attention right now, but it's not as clear yet what is a healthy workplace and how does it work, how does it affect health. So a lot of organizations are still a little bit unaware of the full benefits of the money they spend on the workplace, but also possible hidden costs. For example, if you would say, I'm going to make my work environment more open, to increase communication between employees. There could also be a hidden cost that people feel that they are too much distracted and they can't do their work anymore. So there's a lot of things to consider to create evidence-based design. And in the next lecture for this module, I will explain a little bit more which outcomes organizations can think of.